If there were no term limits for the United States presidency, who do you think would have had the longest run as president? Modern era? Bill Clinton. He had a 65% approval rating at the end of his second term and could have been easily re-elected. In 2000, based on who the opposing candidate would be, I think Eisenhower could have won a third term. Clinton probably. And Obama definitely.
There's a concerning number of people in the thread unaware that FDR died in office.
Reagan would have had a decent shot at a third term, at the very least Obama and Clinton too. But I doubt anyone would unseat FDR. FDR holds the record and is probably the correct choice. The only other person I could think of is Reagan, just given how dominant his two wins were and how HW winning in '88 was essentially a vote for him. He did of course have dementia in his later years as president. But the past two elections have shown people don't really care about cognitive decline. If Theodore Roosevelt decided to run in 1908, he probably could have won both '08 and '12.
Who do you want to run for US president in 2028?
Can we as a country just be single for a while? Maybe just the Bill from Schoolhouse Rock. At least he understood how the Constitution worked.
Someone not 70 to 80 years old with the mentality of a wet fart and billionaire. I'd also settle for someone who is not a pedophile. Unfortunately, you know the rest.
An actual competent adult.
Honestly, at this point I'd settle for a candidate who's just a normal, scandal-free human with basic empathy and common sense.
Someone willing to force Congress to take back all the powers they've been handing to the exec branch. Maximus would be great, but I'll settle for someone that isn't geriatric.
What's something you'll never be able to prove happened, but know with 100% certainty it did?
When I was a kid in the back of my mother's car, I saw a penguin in a pond. We were driving past. A penguin was sat in the pond looking very out of place. My mother was watching the road, and my brother was on the opposite side of the car. I pointed it out, but by the time I got their attention, we had passed and the penguin was no longer in sight. My mother and brother didn't believe me. Later that day, we were watching the news and they were talking about a missing penguin. Somehow they didn't connect the dots and must have forgotten I mentioned a penguin earlier that day. 'Cause when I pointed it out they still didn't believe I'd seen a penguin. I am convinced to this day that I saw the escaped penguin, but I have zero proof.
When I was little, I was playing outside with my cousins at my aunt's house and we saw this guy peeking into a neighbor's windows. We shouted, "It's BTK." Quote, dude turned and looked at us and then quickly walked away. We ran back into my aunt's house and announced that we just saw BTK. Everyone brushed it off. BC, we were young and in Wichita. KS. He was like our boogeyman. For those who aren't into true crime, he was a serial killer. When they caught him years later, I jumped out of my chair when they showed his face on the news. It was the same guy we saw peeping. The neighborhood my aunt lived in was one head struck in before two. I'll never be able to prove that it was actually him that we saw. But even my aunt was convinced because my cousins and I had described the man to her. He looked a lot like my uncle. And, lo and behold, our description was right on.
Casey Anthony did it. One of my childhood friends stole a rare collectible trading card. No one else could have possibly done it. He had a habit of stealing small things. And he was mad at me the day before it disappeared and had been at my house. Add in when I accused him rather than say I didn't do it, he made up some overly complex story about how my parents always left the back door unlocked. I was bragging about it loudly at lunch. I did not. And any kid from town could have biked over to steal it.
This isn't necessarily an event as much as an effect. COVID has drastically increased mental illness. Epstein didn't commit suicide, and I am not a conspiracy person.
What's a sign someone is really smart, but doesn't try to show it? They admit when they don't know something and are genuinely excited to learn. Depends how you define smart. Responses such as tend to be quiet, and listens and reads the room, is much more about emotional intelligence rather than the traditional definition of intelligence, which is more focused on pattern recognition. Lots of really smart people I work with, actuaries a lot, and I am using them as an example, tend to be very bad at reading the room and will most definitely correct people who they see as wrong. In my more limited experience, academics are also like this. If you look at people who have won the Fields Medal or made major scientific breakthroughs, they generally, there are exceptions, don't play well with others. EQ is very different, and again, in my limited experience, is a much better predictor of both financial success and application of intelligence in a meaningful way. To combine both elements, I think what characterizes really smart people is the ability to get the most out of their own strengths and surround themselves with people who complement their weaknesses.
Someone who is quietly intelligent tends to listen closely during conversations, rather than correcting others outright when they're wrong. They ask thoughtful questions to understand their perspective and gently guide them toward a more accurate understanding.
They usually don't brag about how smart they are. They don't say a lot. They know how to observe and read the room.
They can explain complex concepts in simple terms. What pets are red flags to you when someone says they have one?
Anyone with an entire collection of anything that they don't have the time or space to take care of. They're alive. They're not toys. If someone owns a tiger, I think that by a little sus.
Monkeys might look and act cute, but make it jealous or it gets
off. It's gonna rip your friggin' face off. No thanks, ill pass. Edit. Thanks to everyone who liked my comment. This is my biggest ever.
If your dog is chained to a tree for most, if not all of its life, just off onto the sun.
Any of those dog breeds that have a ton of health issues. Or people who get dog breeds that they can't handle. Like someone I know who has a sheepdog but lives in a small apartment and doesn't take the dog out much. These animals have needs, and they are not just here as an accessory. Anyone who owns exotic animal or animal circus. Tigers don't belong in a small cage where they can't roam around. Anyone replying to me stating birds, hamsters, gerbils etc. or exotic? I'm not referring to those, as they not permitted own nor licensed own. I'm talking about animals like hyenas, tigers, apes etc. type.